The 4 decades of rock on 106.1 Rock Radio. All this week, the 70s, prog, punk and power cuts. Today, the technology.
All this week, as part of 4 decades of rock, we're talking about the 70s. Let's get the very knowledgeable and well-read Mr. Sam Inglis from Sound on Sound. How are you, Sam?
I'm fine, mate. How are you?
I'm good. I can't imagine that there was nearly as much innovation in terms of sound recording and the way that people listen to sound, both on record and live, in the 70s as there was in the 60s.
It ran it pretty close. Perhaps not quite as much, but probably more than is obvious.
Can we talk quadraphonic sound? What was all that about?
Now, that was one of the great white elephants of the history of music. I mean, the idea of quadraphonic sound is pretty similar to what we now know as surround sound, except that there were only 4 speakers. And it was much more of a technical challenge in the 70s because it had to be distributed on vinyl. And cutting 4 tracks of music onto a single piece of vinyl is difficult, it turns out.
Does the 70s really see the emergence of hi-fi enthusiasts? I think it does. That hi-fi separates rather than a gramophone or a phonogram, or whatever you wanted to call it.
It's moved out of the realm of just sort of hobbyist nutters, and it's now into the realm of, like, it's a lifestyle thing.
Marantz. One of the world's greatest names in stereo sound products. Marantz Stereo has a true musical sound with virtually no distortion to come between you and the music. Whatever music you enjoy it more on Marantz Stereo. Marantz is music.
Who were the innovators in hi-fi? I mean, the point seemed to be, I think, if you had a hi-fi, was that none of the components would come from the same manufacturer. Your speakers, your turntable, your compact cassette deck, your amp, and your preamp. Let's not forget preamps.
Oh, yes.
And, of course, who could live without a graphic equalizer would all come from different manufacturers and often different parts of the world.
The whole thing about consumer choice. You're not limited to just having your dance set anymore. You've got this massive spectrum of glittering products that you can install into your home and impress everyone who comes around to see you with.
We didn't have a hi-fi. We had a music centre.
Oh.
Which was, again, a very 70s thing, wasn't it?
Absolutely, all that smoked glass and chrome.
The mid-70s, a Japanese executive who travelled frequently between Japan and the US and Europe wanted a way to listen to opera while he was on these long flights. So he invented a portable compact cassette player, did he not?
He did indeed.
Which we know as
the Sony Walkman.
But he hated the name, apparently, didn't he?
Is that right? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he absolutely hated it. He wanted it to be called the Porter Belt or something like that, and Sony said, no, it's a rubbish name. And of course, Walkman was a genius name, and it revolutionised the way that people would listen to music because it brought music into all sorts of places where previously it wasn't.
Possibly the biggest revolution in how music was consumed since the long-playing record.
My little boy, so sensitive, spin my heart.
On ordinary ferric cassettes, recordings are sometimes distorted on the higher notes. BASF Chrome cassettes sound sharper because they're more receptive to high frequencies. So switch to BASF Chrome cassettes for spot-on sound.
Most of the innovations, though, when we've talked about technology, seem to have been made by either American or European companies. But is this really when Sony start to come into their own and start to, instead of just copying as many Japanese manufacturers have done, whether it be motor cars, motorcycles, hi-fi equipment, televisions, they start to innovate, they start to create revolutionary products like the Walkman?
The late 70s and then into the 80s is when you really get the wave of Japanese innovation. And not just in things like cassette players. I mean, if you look at synthesizers, for example, in the mid-70s, late 70s, they're dominated by American companies such as Moog and ARP.
Oh, is that how you pronounce it? I always thought it was Moog.
No, apparently it's Moog.
Oh, right.
Moog and ARP and sequential circuits dominate the market until the late 70s, and then suddenly you get these companies like Roland and Korg, who just basically make more reliable, cheaper synthesizers, and Yamaha, for instance, and they come to completely dominate the market. And by the early 80s, really, most of these American companies have actually gone under.